in the ruthless multi-billion-dollar ecosystem of the National Hockey League. Front offices and fan bases are not merely operating with different priorities or different timelines. They are speaking entirely different, fundamentally incompatible languages that share the same vocabulary, but assign completely opposite values to every word contained within it. Fans speak the deeply human language of nostalgia, of autographs signed for children waiting patiently in the cold, of loyalty rewarded and decades of sacrifice acknowledged with the organizational respect they genuinely deserve. Executives speak the cold, clinical, entirely unsentimental language of salary cap geometry, asset depreciation curves, positional upgrade analysis, and the ruthless mathematical reality that winning a Stanley Cup in the hard-capped era of the modern NHL demands a level of financial discipline that makes no exceptions for the warmth of personal relationships or the depth of institutional history. We are sealing the doors to the tactical war room with maximum analytical urgency today because the Toronto Maple Leafs are currently trapped in the most consequential, most organizationally paralyzing corporate standoff between emotion and mathematics that this franchise has experienced in the modern era of its history. Grab your collective bargaining agreements, pull up your complete defensive analytics packages, and prepare your analytical minds for the most forensically unsparing dissection this channel has conducted surrounding a single-player contract. We are about to crack open the complete audit of Morgan Rielly's public declaration of organizational loyalty and expose with surgical, documented precision exactly why his existing contract represents an almost complete administrative nightmare for the incoming general manager, regardless of the genuine respect and authentic affection that every honest observer of this franchise carries for everything Rielly has contributed to blue and white throughout his remarkable career. Let us immediately and without any organizational sentiment establish the full structural and legal reality of the asset under examination, because the emotional conversation surrounding Morgan Rielly's future in Toronto cannot be conducted honestly without first anchoring it completely in contractual and biomechanical facts that will ultimately determine every available organizational option. Morgan Rielly is 32 years old, a defenseman who has undeniably and generously surrendered the absolute prime years of his athletic career to this organization, enduring through the darkest, most organizationally humbling period of the pre-Auston Matthews rebuilding era, when the franchise offered him nothing in return for a professional commitment except the promise of a better future that repeatedly failed to materialize into championship hardware. That sacrifice is real. It is historically documented, and it deserves genuine organizational acknowledgement from any front office operating with even a basic standard of institutional integrity and professional respect. But we do not evaluate players on the basis of past suffering, past loyalty, or past contributions when conducting the kind of forward-looking financial analysis that determines the competitive health of a franchise for the next 4 to 5 years. We evaluate them exclusively on future geometric output, on the defensive analytics projecting their positional effectiveness in a competitive environment of tomorrow, rather than the emotional memory of the competitive environment of yesterday. And the biomechanical metrics surrounding Rielly's recent performance are beginning to transmit signals that no honest analytical department can responsibly ignore or strategically minimize in the service of a more comfortable organizational narrative. The production numbers are declining from their peak. The defensive gap control metrics are reflecting the physical changes that accompany the natural aging process of every professional athlete regardless of their individual dedication and conditioning commitment. The transition speed that once made Rielly one of the most dangerous offensive activating defensemen in the Eastern Conference is measurably, documentably slower than it was at the height of his physical prime. In a vacuum of organizational freedom, a franchise that just endured the public humiliation of missing the postseason entirely after years of regular season success and repeated early playoff exits would approach an aging, expensive defenseman showing these specific biomechanical signals with a single, clear organizational mandate: liquidate the asset while residual market value remains. Redirect the salary cap resources toward younger, faster, more physically relevant architectural solutions, and accelerate the competitive reset by removing the financial anchor before it drags the rebuild deeper into the salary cap constraints that already limited the previous regime's flexibility. But the Toronto Maple Leafs do not operate in any vacuum of organizational freedom, And the central, defining, organizationally catastrophic reality of the Rielly situation is that the franchise is not operating in any version of a free market when it comes to the specific contract. They are operating inside a corporate prison that the previous organizational regime constructed around themselves with what appeared at the time of signing to be a reasonable, loyalty-rewarding contractual commitment, but what reveals itself in the current organizational context as the ultimate executive trap. Rielly is contractually committed to the Toronto Maple Leafs to the year 2030, carrying an annual average value of $7,500,000 against the salary cap for every single one of those remaining seasons, representing a total future financial obligation of extraordinary magnitude for a player entering the phase of his career where physical regression becomes a dominant variable in every analytical projection, and embedded within that contract, functioning as a legal instrument that transforms an already difficult financial situation into a complete organizational paralysis scenario, is the ultimate executive trump card in the modern NHL contractual landscape. A full no-movement clause granting Rielly absolute, legally unassailable, completely unchallengeable authority over every aspect of any potential trade involving his services. Freeze your financial processing completely and force yourself to examine with total analytical clarity what that specific contractual reality means for the incoming general manager walking through the executive suite doors at Scotiabank Arena for the first time. The new organizational leader, whoever MLSE ultimately selects to navigate this extraordinarily complex competitive reset, arrives at their desk carrying zero leverage in any negotiation involving Morgan. Future with the franchise. Rielly communicated his organizational intentions with complete transparency and genuine emotional authenticity in his conversation with Joshua Cloak of The Athletic, stating explicitly that his desire to remain in Toronto is always going to be present, rooted in the kind of deep, genuine loyalty that a decade of professional commitment to a single organization naturally produces in a person of authentic character. He holds a pen on every document that matters in this situation. If he makes the personal and professional decision to decline any request to waive his no-movement clause, the incoming front office is not merely inconvenienced or strategically constrained. They are mathematically, legally, and completely paralyzed, unable to execute the defensive reconstruction that the competitive reality of the Atlantic Division demands without either the voluntary cooperation of the player or the acceptance of his $7.5 million cap presence as a permanent, immovable architectural feature of the roster for the next 4 years. We must now aggressively pivot our analytical lens to the internal political and public relations dynamics of the Maple Leafs organizational ecosystem, because the contractual paralysis created by the no-movement clause is only one dimension of the complete organizational complexity surrounding the situation. The report illuminates a glaring, strategically significant reality that the incoming general manager cannot afford to underestimate for a single moment in their organizational planning. Morgan Rielly is not merely a popular player within the professional hockey community. He is genuinely, deeply, almost uniquely beloved within the Toronto market in a manner that transcends the normal boundaries of athlete popularity and approaches something closer to institutional affection. The evidence gathered from the team's Easter Seals charitable event is organizationally instructive in ways that extend far beyond the heartwarming surface narrative. His autograph line was longer, more patient, and more enthusiastically sustained than any other player on the ice, a spontaneous, unscripted demonstration of genuine public affection that no marketing department engineered and no public relations strategy manufactured. He has embraced the city of Toronto with authentic personal investment throughout his career, and the city has reciprocated that embrace with a depth of loyalty that creates real, consequential organizational constraints for any front office attempting to navigate his departure. But the fundamental organizational truth that must be stated without apology or diplomatic softening is this: a front office operating with genuine championship ambitions in the ruthlessly competitive modern NHL simply cannot construct a Stanley Cup contending blue line architecture based on the metric of who generates the longest autograph line at a charitable skating event. The popularity that Rielly has earned through years of authentic community engagement and professional dedication creates a massive, potentially franchise-destabilizing public relations landmine for the next general manager that extends far beyond the straightforward challenge of executing a trade involving a player with no movement clause. If the incoming front office attempts to play organizational hardball with Rielly, deploying the kind of pressure tactics that have historically been used to encourage veteran players to voluntarily waive their contractual protections, whether through the reduction of his ice time allocation, the strategic restructuring of his defensive partnerships, the gradual erosion of his organizational standing within the locker room hierarchy, or the application of direct, transparent public pressure through media channels, they risk triggering a dual catastrophe of epic organizational proportions. The locker room reaction to the perceived mistreatment of the franchise's most loyal, most beloved veteran contributor could generate the kind of cultural fracture that undermines every other organizational initiative simultaneously. The fan base reaction to watching the organization publicly pressure a player who has given them everything he possessed for over a decade could produce the kind of sustained, vocal backlash that makes the already difficult challenge of rebuilding in the Toronto media market exponentially more complicated and more publicly painful than it needs to be. The loyalty that Rielly feels toward this franchise is not performative, not strategically manufactured for contract leverage, and not subject to the kind of rational financial recalculation that characterizes the organizational perspective. It is genuine, deeply personal, and completely authentic to the character of a professional who built his adult life and his professional identity in a single city over more than a decade of service. But in the hard-cap competitive reality of the modern National Hockey League, corporate loyalty, however genuine and however deserving of respect, is a financial luxury that organizations engaged in serious competitive reconstruction simply cannot afford to prioritize above the mathematical demands of roster geometry and salary cap efficiency. The incoming general manager must navigate the space between honoring the human reality of Rielly's loyalty and executing the organizational mandate that the competitive situation demands, and that navigation represents perhaps the single most delicate, most politically dangerous, and most consequentially significant personnel challenge of the entire organizational reset. The next general manager of the Toronto Maple Leafs is inheriting what amounts to an almost impossibly complex architectural puzzle with no clean, comfortable, organizationally painless solution available in any direction they choose to move. The organizational mandate is clear and publicly established. This franchise must get younger, faster, more physically dominant on the blue line, and more competitively relevant in the defensive situations that determine playoff survival in the Atlantic Division. Yet the longest tenure, most beloved, most organizationally embedded defenseman in the franchise is a $7.5 million annual average value contractual anchor who has publicly, authentically, and completely transparently declared his intention to exercise every contractual right available to him in order to remain exactly where he is. The two brutal organizational options available to the incoming executive are not comfortable choices between a good outcome and a better outcome. They are genuinely painful choices between two different versions of organizational difficulty, each carrying its own distinct financial costs, competitive consequences, and institutional risks that must be honestly evaluated without the distorting comfort of wishful thinking. The first option demands a